This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm John Berman. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. The breaking news is the biggest departure to date from the Trump administration, and this one was not voluntary. The president has fired his Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in favor of his current CIA Director Mike Pompeo. The president says that he and Rex Tillerson disagreed on things, while he and Pompeo see the world the same way.
I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. Tremendous energy, tremendous intellect. We're always on the same wavelength. The relationship has been very good, and that's what I need as Secretary of State. I wish Rex Tillerson well. Gina, by the way, who I know very well, who I've worked very closely, will be the first woman director of the CIA. She's an outstanding person who also I have gotten to know very well. So I've gotten to know a lot of people very well over the last year. And I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want. But I think Mike Pompeo will be a truly great Secretary of State. I have total confidence in him. And as far as Rex Tillerson is concerned, I very much appreciate his commitment and his service, and I wish him well. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he thought it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same.
You heard it right there. CNN's Caitlin Collins at the White House for more on the thinking about why and when and how this happened.
Well, John, this firing has been a very long time coming. The White House first started planning to put Mike Pompeo in as Secretary of State last fall, and it just took until now for it to actually be put into motion. But the president said there that he and Rex Tillerson disagreed on policy issues like the Iran deal. Clearly, they were on very different pages because last week the president says he did not include Rex Tillerson on those discussions to meet with North Korea, that he largely made those decisions on his own. And as you know, last week, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, just days before, or the day that the president announced he was going to meet with North Korea, was saying that negotiations with North Korea were a long time off. So clearly they disagreed on policy there. But John, this was also a very personal issue as well. The president says that he and Rex Tillerson got along, but that is just simply not the case from what my sources inside of the West Wing tell me. The two men actually strongly disagreed with each other. They were at odds. Just their personalities and the way that they spoke during briefings and meetings did not get along. And also, as you remember, Rex Tillerson referred to the president as a moron last summer during a meeting at the Pentagon, and the president knew about it at the time. He was told by someone that had happened, but then that didn't leak until later on in the fall, and that's when it was out in the press. The president became incredibly frustrated with Rex Tillerson, and his anger over Tillerson calling him a moron never subsided. So it's important to keep that in mind, that this was much more than just a policy disagreement here between the president and the Secretary of State. It was also a very personal disagreement. But that last comment there about how he thinks he almost has his cabinet the way he wants it is very telling, John, and it makes you wonder who could be on the chopping block next.
Indeed, and we know not a cabinet level official, but we do know there was another sort of mysterious departure from the White House and sudden, the president's personal assistant. What have you learned there, Caitlin?
Yeah, that's right, John. This news actually broke while we were on the South Lawn waiting for the president to board Marine One to head to California. And it's very stunning news, not just outside of the White House, not just to those of us who cover the White House, but also to people inside the West Wing. And that's the president's personal aide, Johnny McEntee, was fired from the White House and escorted from the White House grounds yesterday. And we are told by sources that it was something to do with his background check. There's still a lot of no clarity surrounding exactly what issues came up in his background check, because this is someone who has been very close to the president over the last 14 months that they've been in office. Not even just that, but he was a near constant presence here in the West Wing, almost always by the president's side, and also very close to the president's family. So he was one of those few aides who actually goes over to the residence at times. Very, very few people who do that. So he was very close to the president, but they have announced that he is joining those Trump re-election efforts. So it's just a lot of confusion surrounding that aid, but it has stunned even people inside the White House here, John.
All right, we'll find out more about that. All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House. The major breaking news today is a huge shakeup in the national security leadership of this country. Rex Tillerson out as Secretary of State. Let's talk more about this. I'm joined by Michelle Kaczynski, CNN senior diplomatic correspondent, and Elise Labott, global affairs correspondent. And Michelle, there has been an official statement released by a State Department official here, which is extraordinary, about how the Secretary of State found out about this and the fact that he still wanted to stay on the job.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that you can just feel the scrambling and the shock over this within the building. Not to say that this wasn't a long time in coming. I mean, these rumors have been out there since before Christmas time, when there were people close to the president saying they were just waiting for Tillerson to punch his card and leave the building. Well, something happened. They mended their fences for at least the time being. And then today, this stunning announcement. So the first word out of the State Department was that the secretary had every intention of staying because of critical progress he feels has been made within the realm of national security. And the State Department said he didn't speak to the president and is unaware of the reason. I think that's key, and just the way that he found out about this. I mean, when we said, how did he find out then? If he didn't speak to the president and he doesn't know why he's been fired, the first thing I was told was he found out the same way everybody else found out. That's the kind of indignity that Tillerson, the former CEO of Exxon, has had to deal with within this administration. I mean, the list is very long. When you think about after it emerged that he had referred to the president as a moron in a meeting, he was forced by the White House to give this statement declaring his belief that President Trump is a smart guy and that he respects them and that they work well together. I mean, to watch this happening at the time was excruciating and unprecedented. And to have the Secretary of State repeatedly undercut by President, I think you look at this situation for the past several months and you just think, how long is this really going to last? But there's still the timing element of surprise that the White House so relishes. Just yesterday, a senior State Department official was telling us that Secretary Tillerson is the Secretary of Stay, and he has all these big plans. And 2 days ago, they were at pains to tell us how involved he had been in the whole North Korea announcement.
His Secretary of Stay is now gone, Michelle Kaczynski. And in terms of being out of the loop, the president made clear this morning that he did not consult with Rex Tillerson in any way on his decision to meet with Kim Jong-un. He made that crystal clear today. The president said, I just didn't see the need.
Exactly.
And Elise Labott, you have still more exactly on how the the Secretary of State, outgoing Secretary of State, found out about all of this, shedding some light on what Michelle means by he found out the same way we all did.
John, he found out, as a lot of us do, about the president's decisions in a tweet. Found out this morning, got back from a week-long trip to Africa, which he actually cut short. We'll have to find out a little bit about how much he knew privately over the weekend. But he cut his trip short. Aide said that he had a lot of work to do on the North Korea issue, on this crisis between U.S. allies, on tariffs. He has some Hill testimony later in the week, so he cut his trip short about a half a day, got in about 4 o'clock this morning. And aides saying that he was never officially notified by the White House, that he found out this morning in a presidential tweet. And you'll remember, I spoke to Secretary Tillerson earlier this year, and he told me that he was planning on staying throughout at least the year. I said, has the president given you any indication that your job is on the line? He said, no, not whatsoever. And this kind of Secretary of State has been, floating around along the 7th floor where his suite of offices for some time. He did think that he kind of weathered the storm, as he told me. He was starting to get the hang of how to, help and advise this very mercurial and very unique president. And I think Secretary Tillerson thought that he was founding his footing.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Really fascinating reporting here. Joining me now, CNN military and diplomatic analyst, former State Department spokesman, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, also joined by CNN's chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto. Admiral, I shudder to think about the position you would be in if you were at the State Department as the spokesman right now, trying to explain how the secretary, may have found out about this on Twitter this morning. Leave that aside. Let's talk about the significant national security implications to this move. Rex Tillerson, we know, opposed pulling out of the Iran deal. The president seems to be for it. Now Rex Tillerson is gone. On North Korea, the secretary seemed to have a slightly different view than the president. The president agreed to meet with Kim Jong-un without even consulting the secretary. This will represent a shift on important issues.
Oh, no question that it will. And in Mike Pompeo, one can assume that the president is getting a Secretary of State more aligned with his thinking. And look, that's the president's right. He deserves to have cabinet officers who espouse his worldview and his policy formulation process and then go and articulate it. There's two ways of looking at this, John. I mean, to foreign leaders, this might be a good move because Tillerson was never really seen as a reputable, credible voice on behalf of President Trump because they knew. Everybody knew that there were differences of opinion on policy between the two men and that Secretary Tillerson didn't really speak for Donald Trump. Now you'll have a Secretary of State who will probably be much more credible on the world stage. And so that's a good thing, I think, in terms of one voice for American policy. It's not such a good thing, I don't think, for our diplomats and the Department of State, which was already bristling under Tillerson's sort of ham-fisted management style, but under Mike Pompeo now, it's going to be a much more political Department of State than it was under Rex Tillerson. The other losers here, in my view, are the Pentagon. Secretary Mattis and Secretary Tillerson had a great relationship. They were marching in unison. They were really, to the degree you can give Trump credit for the pressure campaign on North Korea, that really belongs to Mattis and Tillerson, who really kind of pushed that forward, and Nikki Haley. And so now Secretary Mattis isn't going to have that same partnership. Now he'll find a way to work with Mike Pompeo, John, but it'll be a different relationship for him.
Jim Sciutto is with us as well. And Jim, the director to replace the nominee to replace Mike Pompeo at the CIA will be Deputy Director Gina Haspel, who's an intelligence lifer, respected by many inside this community, but also someone who has been a controversial figure in the past as well.
No question. She was involved in one of the most difficult, controversial eras in the CIA, which was regarding the question of enhanced interrogation, in the words of some, torture in the words of others, and not only involved in directing that program, but also involved in an effort to cover it up, to destroy videos that documented the use of enhanced interrogation, torture. So that is an issue certain to come up at our confirmation hearing, but also one of substance, and one that not all, but many intelligence professionals take issue with, because they're not happy with that period in the CIA's history, and understandably so. The other point I would make is this. I mean, every other day we talk about instability, changes of personnel in the White House. So that is it's an interesting story, no question, but let's think about the substance of it here. It's about the way this White House runs. This was the Secretary of State, the nation's highest diplomat, who the president just moments ago confirmed he did not consult on a decision to speak directly with the leader of North Korea, the most pressing national security diplomatic issue for this country. The president did not consult his Secretary of State, his most senior diplomatic advisor, on that decision. That tells you something about how decisions are made in this White House and how power is concentrated at the top. That's key. And then substantively going forward, Rex Tillerson was a moderating voice for this president on a number of issues. And the president, again, moments ago, mentioned one of those, which was the Iran deal. The president has made many public comments about tearing it up, both during the campaign and since then. Rex Tillerson was, on that issue, and others, frankly, one that advised the president on a less radical course. So that voice is gone. Mike Pompeo, smart guy, graduated first in his class at West Point, served in Congress, ran the CIA, knows his stuff, but has also been more deft politically with this president, much more reluctant to disagree with the president in public, step out of line rhetorically on issues such as Russia, the Russia investigation, the Iran deal, etc. So as John Kirby was saying there, a more politically aligned White House, you might say. Now we don't know what advice Mike Pompeo gives in private to the president. May be different from his public statements. He may push back on the president in private more than he does in public. But at least in public, it's a different situation. And you saw an example of that just in the last few hours, rather, with on the poisoning of this former Russian spy in the UK. Yesterday, former Secretary Tillerson said explicitly, Russia looks like it's to blame, and this is unacceptable. That the president has said himself, well, let's have the facts. So, that'll be a different kind of relationship
Indeed.
in the White House going forward.
There is no question that Mike Pompeo has learned to speak the language publicly and on television in a way that the president approves. And we know that is very important to this president. All right, Admiral Kirby, Jim Sciutto, thank you very, very much. The breaking news is the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has been fired by the president. We believe he got final word by learning about it from Twitter this morning. The Secretary of State. We have new developments. Stay with us.